I paid nearly $470,000 to buy my parents a home to retire in peace. 3 months later, they threw a housewarming party and didn't even invite me. Instead, they handed the keys to my sister, the same woman who once told me I should have never been born. What happened next shocked everyone and changed our family forever. My name is Melissa, I'm 38, and for the past 17 years, I've been building my career in financial strategy at a top investment firm in Chicago. On paper, my life looks polished: senior management role, a respected name in finance, a 6-figure income, and a spotless resume. But this story isn't about my career. It's about how my success made me a stranger to the people who were supposed to love me the most. To understand the betrayal, you need to know where it all began. My parents were in their mid-40s when I came along. Surprise! My older sister Lindsay, 10 years my senior, was the golden child from the beginning. Blonde, brilliant, and bold, she got the spotlight. I got the shadows. And the phrase my mom loved to repeat, "We weren't planning on you, honey," was delivered not with cruelty, but with a passive detachment that somehow cut deeper. She'd say it while braiding Lindsay's hair or arranging her debate team uniform. "You weren't planned, but we made it work." She'd laugh, clipping ribbons on Lindsay's science fair project while I sat silently at the table, doing my math homework by myself. That sentence haunted my childhood, like a slogan carved into every room in our house. The only refuge I had was my grandparents. My grandpa, a retired math professor, would tap the table with his pen and say, "Numbers don't lie, Melissa. People do. Learn to trust what you can calculate." He'd draw out probability charts with jelly beans and explain stock market concepts like fairy tales. My grandma, a former high school teacher, taught me to cook, not as a chore but as an art. She'd say, "This is how you show someone love, with patience and garlic." I never forgot that. At home, Lindsay was a celebrity and I was the cleaning crew. By the time I was 14, I was in charge of dinner, laundry, and every chore Lindsay used to do before she left for college. "My mom didn't ask," she announced. "You're old enough now," she said one evening. "We expect the house cleaned by the time we get back." No, thank you. Just expectation. Still, I thrived in school. Math and economics were my sanctuaries. I aced every test, earned straight A's, and got full rides to 3 elite universities. The same day I received my acceptance letters, Lindsay waltzed into the house with her new fiancé Andrew, announced their engagement, and within minutes my parents were crying tears of joy and offering to pay for everything. "We'll cover the wedding," my mom declared, already reaching for her notepad to plan venues. That night, I placed my 3 college letters on the dinner table. My mother didn't even look up from her plate. "That's nice, but we don't have the money, Melissa. We spent it on your sister's wedding," I whispered. "But you paid for her college too." My mom shrugged. "That was different." She showed promise. The silence that followed was unbearable. Later that evening, I drove to my grandparents' home with shaking hands and eyes full of tears. My grandpa listened without a word, then brought out a battered manila folder. "We've been saving for you since the day you were born," he said. "Because we knew they wouldn't." Inside were bank statements. Tens of thousands saved with careful, consistent deposits. "Pick whichever college you want," he said. "We've got you." I moved in with them that very night. That decision became the first act of rebellion in my otherwise obedient life. I majored in quantitative finance and never looked back. I interned on Wall Street, secured my first analyst position by 23, and became a senior VP by 30. My life, once built on borrowed time and second-hand attention, was now defined by competence and clarity. Meanwhile, Lindsay's life didn't turn out as picture-perfect as she made it seem. Her marketing career fell apart, Andrew's business ventures collapsed, and by the time they had twins, they were living paycheck to paycheck, still draining money from my parents. When my grandparents passed within 2 months of each other, I was devastated. They were my real parents, the ones who made me feel wanted. At the will reading, I learned they'd left me their house and $180,000 in savings. To my mother, they left a single note. Margaret, remember we gave you $250,000 when you needed it. We expect you to honor our final wishes. My mother turned ghost pale. My father stared at his shoes. Lindsay looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under her designer heels. In the weeks that followed, my parents came to me, almost begging. We thought we'd inherit the house, my mother said. Lindsay and the twins need somewhere to stay. Instead of slamming the door, I offered something else. I told them I'd buy them a new home, smaller, easier to maintain, in a nice area. I sold my grandparents' house, used part of my savings, and found them a beautiful single-story home with a garden my dad could fuss over and a cozy kitchen my mom could finally enjoy. They cried with joy. For a moment I thought, just maybe, we could be a real family again. But then came the Facebook post. Lindsay's caption read, "Can't wait for Mom and Dad's housewarming party this Saturday. So proud to celebrate their beautiful new home house with garden red heart." I stared at the photos, twinkling lights, catered trays, balloons spelling, "Welcome home." A party I was never invited to, for the house I had bought. And that's when everything changed. I sat in my car outside the very house I had bought with my own money, parked a block away, gripping the steering wheel like it might keep me grounded in a reality that had clearly gone sideways. Through the oversized bay windows, I could see it all, balloons spelling, "Welcome home." Tables overflowing with catered food, and dozens of guests laughing in a place I had handpicked and paid for. My father, in a new golf polo, was giving tours of the living room. My mother was standing at the entrance in her pearl necklace, smiling wide and ushering people in like royalty. The "for sale" sign I'd helped remove just weeks ago was nowhere to be seen. I watched as Lindsay's twin boys zipped across the lawn in superhero capes, narrowly missing trays of mini quiches. I could see moving boxes in the hallway, boxes marked in Lindsay's handwriting. They weren't just throwing a party. They were already moving in. I took a deep breath, locked my car, and walked around to the side entrance. The door was unlocked, typical, and I slipped in through the laundry room. It smelled like fresh flowers and high-end catering. I followed the hum of voices toward the living room, past the table of chafing dishes and into the heart of the party. And that's when I heard my mother's voice. "And of course, we couldn't have done it without Lindsay," she said, raising a glass. She was so generous with the down payment. Such a devoted daughter. Always thinking of family first. The crowd applauded. Someone raised a toast. My father chuckled. "We worked hard all our lives. It's only right to finally enjoy the dream home we earned." Then came the dagger. A guest asked, "Where's your other daughter? Melissa, right?" My mother didn't flinch. "Oh, she's too busy with her career to care about these things. She hasn't helped with any of this." Lindsay laughed, flipping her hair. "Some people think success means forgetting where they came from." My entire body went cold. I stepped into the room, every conversation grinding to a halt like the record had scratched. The silence was instant and suffocating. "Actually," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I think you've got that backward." Dozens of faces turned. Some looked surprised. Others uncomfortable. My father stood there with a forced grin, trying to think fast. "Melissa? What a surprise." "Not really," I replied. Just confused why I wasn't invited to the housewarming party, for the house I bought. Lindsay's smile cracked like porcelain. My mother's face went pale. "Now, honey," she began, "we didn't mean to exclude you. It was just a little last-minute gathering." "A little gathering that's been planned for weeks?" I said, holding up my phone with the Facebook screenshots. "Caterers, banners, decorations, and guests flown in from out of state. I'm not stupid." "You don't understand," my father said. "This is a family event." "That's funny," I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out a folder. "Because according to these ownership documents, this family event is happening in my house." I opened the folder and handed copies of the property deed to the nearest guests, Lindsay's friends, who immediately looked like they wanted to vanish. You might want to take your drinks and go. This party's over. You can't do this, my mother hissed, suddenly dropping her pretense. We're your parents. This house is ours now. Lindsay's kids need space. We've already moved out of our old place. You need space? I said slowly. Then maybe you should have treated the person who gave you this space with an ounce of respect. My father stepped forward. Melissa, you're being unreasonable. No, I said, locking eyes with him. I was being kind. Now I'm being clear. Get out. There was a ripple of gasps. Lindsay looked around like a child caught cheating on a test. You're not serious. I am. You lied. You planned to let Lindsay and her family move in behind my back. You told people she paid for the down payment. You pretended I didn't exist. And you used my money, my name, my kindness as your own. You're heartless. My mother spat, her voice rising. Just like your grandparents warned us you'd become. I stared at her for a beat. No, I said. They warned me about you. She froze. I turned to the guests. This is my home. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And one by one they filed out. Slowly. Awkwardly. Lindsay tried to grab a centerpiece on the way out, and I said sharply, Leave it. Within 20 minutes the house was empty. The once festive lights now looked ridiculous. Half-finished drinks sat on marble countertops. Cake slices sagged on paper plates. The moving boxes, Lindsay's boxes, were still stacked by the hallway, their tape barely holding. And just like that, everything was quiet. Later that night, I sat alone in the house I had bought for reconciliation, now tainted with betrayal. I stared at the "Welcome Home" banner still hanging over the fireplace, and all I could think was, welcome home indeed. But not for them. Not anymore. The next morning, I woke up to 47 missed calls. 15 from my mother. 8 from Lindsay. Even Andrew had left a voicemail. I didn't listen to a single one. Instead, I brewed my coffee, walked through the wreckage of what had once been a party, and quietly began removing their fingerprints from my life. I boxed up the photos they'd hung, pictures of Lindsay and her kids on family vacations I was never invited to. I peeled off the decorative decals my mother had stuck to the kitchen backsplash and tossed the fake flowers into a trash bag. And I set aside every moving box with Lindsay's name on it. When the movers arrived that afternoon, sent by her, not me, I was ready. You can load these and leave. I told them. Nothing else goes. That was the end of it. Or so I thought. That Sunday, I was doing laundry when my phone buzzed again. This time, a text from my father. You owe us a conversation. No, hi. No, sorry. Just that. 5 words that made my blood run cold. Because that's what it always came back to with them. Oh. I owed them. For being born. For daring to thrive without their permission. For proving them wrong. That word, oh, dragged me back to a different moment, one I hadn't thought about in years. I was 16. It was late, maybe 10 p.m., and I'd just gotten home from tutoring. I'd spent the day helping other kids prep for math competitions I wasn't allowed to enter because my parents couldn't spare the gas money. I opened the door and found Lindsay and her friends sprawled in the living room watching movies. Melissa. My mom called from the kitchen. The toilet upstairs overflowed again. Go clean it before bed. No, please. No acknowledgement that I hadn't even taken off my shoes. I've been out all day, I said. She raised an eyebrow. And I have homework. Well, some people in this house actually contribute. She snapped, nodding toward Lindsay, who didn't even look up from her phone. I remember turning to my dad, who was sitting at the kitchen table. Dad? He sipped his coffee and didn't even look at me. You live here. Do your part. I went upstairs and scrubbed that bathroom floor with tears falling onto the tile. And that was the night I stopped asking for fairness. It was the night I realized they didn't see me as a daughter. Just a guest. And here I was again, 20 years later, being reminded of it. Only now I wasn't 16. I had power. Money. A deed in my name. And I had no intention of being the family housemaid again. I didn't respond to my father's message. But I did send him one thing, a photo of the property deed. No caption. No explanation. Just the facts. That evening, Lindsay showed up unannounced. I saw her through the Ring camera. She looked flustered, holding a tote bag in one hand and a toddler in the other. I didn't open the door. She rang the bell twice. Then knocked. Then stood there, trying to look innocent. Through the speaker I said, "If you're here to apologize, mail it." She froze. Then, almost too casually, "Mom and Dad can't afford their new apartment. The lease is up in 2 weeks. We've got nowhere to go." I said nothing. "I mean, it's not like you're even using the whole house." She paused. "You always liked your space." "Fine. Keep the bedrooms. Just let us stay in the basement." I almost laughed. "You thought I'd just let you back in. It's not forever, Mel. Just until Andrew finds steady work." "Steady work," I repeated, tasting the lie like metal on my tongue. Then she made the mistake. "You're being petty. You have no idea what it's like to raise kids. You don't understand what real family does." That's when I stepped closer to the mic. "No," I said. "You don't understand what real family doesn't do." And I ended the call. She left 15 minutes later, but not before throwing a rock at the mailbox. It cracked. Just like our last remaining thread. I changed the locks the next morning. What they didn't know, what they still don't know, is that I'd already decided to sell the house. Not because I needed the money, but because I wanted no trace of their entitlement to follow me. It was time for something more. I didn't answer when they showed up again. This time, it wasn't just Lindsay. It was all of them. My parents, Lindsay, Andrew, and the twins, standing on my front porch in the rain like a traveling apology tour that forgot how to apologize. I watched them from my office window upstairs, silently sipping coffee as they argued amongst themselves. I blocked their calls, ignored their emails, but somehow they still believed that showing up in person would break me down. I waited. 10 minutes. Then 15. When I didn't open the door, Lindsay pounded her fist against the wood. "Melissa! We're not leaving! You can't do this to us!" My mother's voice was shrill. "We're family!" And there it was again, that word. Family. Used like a crowbar. A lever to pry open any door they'd slammed shut themselves. I didn't open it. I didn't yell. I didn't even record it. I just let them stand there until they finally, slowly, disappeared into the drizzle. But inside, something was breaking apart and rearranging itself. Later that week, I had dinner with my attorney, a friend of mine from college. We were reviewing documents for the house sale. I told her about the situation. She took a sip of wine and said, "You ever think they didn't just fail to love you? Maybe they actively resented that you didn't need them." It hit me harder than I expected. That's when I decided to pull out the last card my grandparents had ever given me. See, my grandmother left behind not just memories, but a series of letters, written over the course of her final year. She'd written one for me, one for my parents, and one for Lindsay. She gave them to her estate manager with specific instructions. They were to be delivered only if our family fractured beyond reconciliation. Apparently, she'd seen this coming before I ever did. The estate manager contacted me a week after I blocked my family. I was the only one who hadn't changed their address. He asked if I wanted the letter. I said yes. And what I read changed everything. My darling Melissa, if you're reading this, I imagine you're heartbroken in ways I hoped you'd never be. But I also imagine you're stronger now than you've ever been, because that's what you do. You survive storms others pretend don't exist. Your mother loved you in her own way, but she never understood you. And your sister, well, Lindsay always needed the spotlight. Some children are taught they're special. Others are taught to be useful. You were the latter, and it wasn't fair. I want you to know, we always saw you. Every homework sheet, every dinner, every sacrifice. You were our light in the shadows they cast. The house was never about real estate. It was about giving you back something they took: dignity. Autonomy. A place you wouldn't have to fight to be seen in. Use it wisely, or don't. Burn it to the ground if that's what it takes to build your own peace. And remember, you are not the guest. You are the foundation. Love, always. Grandma. I read the letter 3 times that night. Then I pulled the others from the envelope and walked them straight to the mailbox. I didn't read theirs. That wasn't my business anymore. 3 days later, my mother called from a new number. I didn't answer. 2 days after that, I got a handwritten note shoved under my office door at work. It was from Lindsay. The handwriting was tight and panicked. There were no greetings. No signatures. Just this: we didn't think you'd actually cut us off. We thought you'd always be there. Please. The twins are asking why Aunt Melissa won't come around. We told them you're just busy. But I don't know what to say anymore. That last line stuck with me. They didn't think I'd cut them off. Because they'd never once believed I was capable of it. They had built their entire world assuming I would always hold the floor beneath them. But I was done being their foundation. So I called my realtor. I'm ready, I said. List the house. Whatever gets it sold fastest. She asked if I wanted to remove any personal items before the open house. I thought for a moment. Then I said, no. Leave everything. Because there was nothing personal left. I didn't attend the open house. I stayed in my apartment downtown, ate takeout from the Thai place around the corner, and waited. By the end of the week, we had 3 offers, 2 above asking. The house that was supposed to be a gift, then a graveyard of old resentments, was now just property again. Square footage. Zip code. A memory for someone else to live in. The night before closing, my mom showed up at my apartment building. She must have begged the concierge to call me because he buzzed me with a hesitant, "There's an older woman downstairs who says she's your mother. Should I?" I paused. Then answered, "No. But give her this." I handed the concierge a sealed envelope with a single sentence inside. A sentence I'd rewritten 20 times before realizing how little needed to be said. He nodded. Handed it off. She stood outside for 30 minutes in her beige coat and heels, shifting her weight between sobs and disbelief, reading the letter over and over. Inside was one line in my handwriting. You were never the victims. You were just never told no. That night, Lindsay tried again. This time it was an email with pictures, her kids holding drawings, smiling. One said, "We miss you, Auntie M." I stared at it for a long time. There was sadness, yes. But not for what I'd lost. Only for what never really existed in the first place. I replied with one sentence. Please don't use your children as currency. Then I blocked her again. The house closed 2 days later. $532,000 wired into my account. I donated half of it. The rest I used to start something new, a mentorship fund for young women in finance who come from emotionally abusive families. Girls who, like me, were told they were too much, or not enough, depending on the day. I named it the Clara Foundation, after my grandmother. I didn't tell anyone in my family. But the first student I awarded the scholarship to, her name was Maggie, wrote me a letter that reminded me of myself. She said, "I never thought someone would believe in me enough to help. I won't let it go to waste." That's what real legacy looks like. Not inheritance. Not hand-me-downs. Belief. 3 months later, I drove past my parents' apartment one last time. The blinds were drawn. The porch was cluttered. Lindsay's twins were chasing each other across the sidewalk with paper swords. For a moment, I imagined pulling over. But then I looked in the rearview mirror and said out loud, "Not my circus. Not my monkeys." I drove on. And I never looked back.